1. Your problems are not permanent. They are simply signals calling you to rise. 2. The altitude of your life is determined by the altitude of your thoughts. 3. Every obstacle contains a seed of power if you dare to look at it from above. 4. Your mind becomes unstoppable the moment you stop negotiating with weakness. 5. To rise higher, you must detach from the noise of ordinary thinking. 6. Transformation happens the instant you decide your old limits are too small for your future. Before you take another step in your life's journey, I want you to imagine something extraordinary. Imagine standing on a mountain so high that the struggles that once kept you awake at night look like tiny specks at your feet. Imagine facing challenges that used to terrify you, and now you simply smile at them because you have become far greater than anything that ever tried to stop you. If you stay with me until the end of this message, you will discover the mental law that allows ordinary people to rise to such heights that their old problems lose all power over them. This is not motivation. This is a principle that will shape the rest of your life. You rise the moment you decide that your old way of thinking no longer matches the destiny you seek. Problems do not shrink by themselves. You expand beyond them. The world has taught you to stare at your obstacles. But life changes when you learn to rise above them. The size of your problem is nothing compared to the size of the mind facing it. When the mind grows, the problem shrinks. When the mind elevates, the problem dissolves. Every person who has created a breakthrough began by rejecting the belief that they must remain where they started. There is a higher version of you that already exists. It lives beyond fear, beyond hesitation, beyond limitation. But it cannot come forward until you silence the noise around you. The doubts, the worries, the voices that insist you stay small. To rise above your old problems, you must rise above the old conversations in your head. You must stop telling yourself the story of who you were and start telling the story of who you intend to become. The brain follows the narrative you give it. Write a stronger one. Your problems are not here to break you. They are here to build you. Every difficulty you face contains a message, and that message is simple: go higher. When life blocks one path, it is instructing you to build wings. When life closes one door, it is pushing you toward another that leads you far beyond your previous level. It is never the problem that stops a person. It is their refusal to grow beyond the level of the problem. The moment you grow, the obstacle loses its grip. You must understand a secret. You rise when you become more committed to your future than you are attached to your past. Everything you want exists at a higher frequency than the life you have been living. If you keep thinking the same way, you stay on the same level. But if you lift your thoughts, if you nourish your mind with purpose, courage, and determination, your life must rise to match them. There is no force in the universe that can stop a mind that has decided to expand. Think of every powerful person you admire. They all learned to detach from small thinking. They discovered that the world bends to the individual who refuses to bend to mediocrity. They acted with persistence when others hesitated. They believed in possibilities long before they saw results. And because they believed at a higher level, they lived at a higher level. Now it is your turn. Your old problems are nothing more than reminders of the limits you tolerated for too long. Do not argue with them. Do not fear them. Rise above them. A problem can only control you from the level where it was created. If you rise higher, it cannot reach you. The moment you step into a greater vision of yourself, the chains that once held you break instantly. Do not settle for a life where you constantly fight the same battles. Ascend to a level where those battles cannot follow you. Strengthen your mindset until doubt no longer speaks your language. Build such clarity that confusion cannot survive near you. Develop such discipline that excuses evaporate in your presence. And one day, sooner than you think, you will look back and laugh at the problems that once made you question yourself. Not because the problems changed, but because you did. You rose, you climbed, you transformed. And when you rise far enough above the storm, you realize the storm was never the threat. Remaining on the ground was. Rise now, rise higher. Rise so far above your old problems that they become stories you tell, not battles you fight. Your future is calling you upward. Answer it with courage. Your problems are not permanent. They are simply signals calling you to rise. And the moment you begin to understand this truth, something inside you awakens. You start noticing that challenges are not there to punish you, but to prepare you for the life you say you want. Every struggle you face carries within it a message, a direction, a demand. It is life whispering you are meant for more than this level. Elevate yourself. Most people misunderstand their problems. They interpret them as signs to retreat, signs that they are unworthy, signs that the world is against them. But the individuals who rise to extraordinary heights have learned to translate problems differently. They see them as invitations. They understand that every problem is proof that you are expanding beyond your old identity. Problems only appear when you are pushing into new territory, and that means you are growing. When you view your problems through the lens of fear, they become mountains. But when you view them through the lens of growth, they become stepping stones. Your reaction determines their size. Your interpretation determines their power. A problem can appear enormous when you believe you are small, but it becomes insignificant the moment you realize you have the capacity to grow larger than whatever confronts you. Nothing in your external environment has the authority to defeat you unless you surrender your internal strength. And that inner strength multiplies every single time you decide not to back down when life challenges your progress. You do not rise when circumstances are easy. You rise when circumstances demand that you elevate your thinking. A person's ascent always begins in the mind long before it shows up in their life. When you decide to grow, your outer world cannot help but change. Yet most people want the world to shift before they shift their beliefs. They want solutions without sacrifice. They want transformation without the discomfort of growth. But problems are the teachers that force you to develop qualities you would never cultivate voluntarily. Without pressure, you would never learn resilience. Without resistance, you would never build courage. Without setbacks, you would never discover the strength buried inside you. Your problems are not barriers, they are blueprints. They are showing you exactly which part of your character needs strengthening. They are revealing the very skill, habit, or belief that must evolve if you want to rise to a higher level of life. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Shift your thinking to, what is this trying to build within me? That question alone changes your entire relationship with adversity. Suddenly, the problem becomes purposeful. Suddenly, the weight you carry becomes the weight that shapes you. And when you start viewing your challenges this way, something extraordinary happens. The fear you once felt begins to dissolve. You start stepping toward the very things you used to avoid. You begin to rise, not because the path gets easier, but because you get stronger. The altitude of your life is determined by the altitude of your thoughts, and this simple truth is one of the greatest separators between those who rise and those who remain where they are. Your mind is the engine that sets your direction, your pace, and your destination. Everything you experience externally begins as an internal pattern of thought. If your thoughts remain low, your life will follow. If your thoughts elevate, your life will ascend with them. This is not philosophy. It is a principle that governs every individual who has ever achieved greatness. The moment you lift your thinking, you initiate the process of lifting your entire existence. Most people never rise because they think from the level of their fears instead of the level of their potential. They allow circumstances to dictate their outlook, and because their thinking remains limited, their results remain limited. You cannot expect abundance while feeding your mind scarcity. You cannot expect confidence while rehearsing doubt. You cannot expect a higher life while maintaining lower thoughts. What you entertain mentally becomes what you experience physically. And until you take full responsibility for the quality of your thoughts, you will never take control of the quality of your life. The mind is like an elevator. It can take you to the highest floors of possibility or keep you stuck on the ground level of your old habits. Every thought you allow either lifts you or lowers you. Every idea you repeat either strengthens your power or weakens it. Most people do not fail because they lack ability. They fail because they remain loyal to thoughts that do not serve them. Those who rise detach from the gravitational pull of negative thinking. They recognize that every low thought carries a weight, a heaviness that slows their ascent. And so they release those thoughts one by one until their mind becomes light enough to climb. To elevate your thoughts, you must first become aware of them. Too many people are unconscious of the mental patterns ruling their lives. They react out of old beliefs, old fears, and old stories without ever questioning whether those stories are still true. But the moment you pause and observe your thinking, you gain power over it. You begin to notice which thoughts drain your energy and which ones fuel your spirit. You begin to see that your mind has been repeating narratives that no longer belong to the person you are striving to become. Awareness is the first step to elevation because you cannot rise above what you do not recognize. Once you awaken to the influence of your thoughts, you gain the ability to choose them deliberately. You can select thoughts that lift you, thoughts that strengthen you, thoughts that align with the life you desire. And the more consistently you choose elevated thinking, the more naturally you begin to rise. High thoughts create high decisions. High decisions create high actions, and high actions create a high life. It is impossible to think powerfully and live weakly. Your life will always climb to meet the level of your dominant thoughts. Every obstacle contains a seed of power if you dare to look at it from above. Most people stare at the obstacle itself and never discover the secret hidden within it. They see the wall, but they never search for the door. They feel the weight, but they never uncover the strength that weight is designed to build within them. Obstacles are not random interruptions to your path. They are strategic elements placed in your journey to elevate your capacity. When you begin to understand this, the fear you once felt toward challenges begins to fade because you realize every difficulty is carrying something valuable, something that exists for your growth, not your destruction. The problem is that most individuals approach obstacles from the ground level. From that angle, everything looks impossible. From that angle, the obstacle appears larger than life, and the person feels smaller than ever. But the moment you rise above the obstacle, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, you gain a new perspective. From above, what once seemed overwhelming becomes manageable. From above, what once felt like a threat becomes an opportunity. Perspective is the elevation that reveals the seed of power hiding inside the challenge. And without this elevation, you will always misinterpret your obstacles. Every time life tests you, it is offering you something. Sometimes it's discipline, sometimes it's strength, sometimes it's clarity, sometimes it's resilience. But it always offers something. The question is whether you will reach into the challenge and take the gift, or whether you will retreat and allow the obstacle to become a barrier instead of a blessing. Those who rise high in life have one thing in common. They extract power from their problems. They do not waste pain. They do not run from difficulty. They stand in front of the obstacle long enough to discover what it came to teach them. The moment you adopt this mindset, you transform the entire way you experience adversity. You stop seeing challenges as setbacks and start seeing them as catalysts. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin asking, "What advantage is hidden here?" That simple shift changes the vibration of your mind. It lifts your thinking from victimhood to mastery. It moves you from helplessness to intention. And when the mind rises, the obstacle loses its grip. No obstacle is placed before you unless you are capable of overcoming it. Life does not test you where you are weak. It tests you where you are ready to grow. The presence of an obstacle is confirmation that you have reached the edge of your old level and are now standing at the threshold of a new one. If you choose to advance, you rise. If you choose to retreat, you remain. Every obstacle becomes a doorway the moment you step toward it with courage rather than fear. When you look at your challenges from a higher place, the seed of power within them begins to reveal itself. It shows you the strength you didn't know you had. It shows you the potential you hadn't yet activated. It shows you that what you saw as a barrier was actually the very thing designed to expand you, shape you, elevate you, and prepare you for the heights waiting above your current level. Your mind becomes unstoppable the moment you stop negotiating with weakness. Weakness is not an external force. It is the quiet whisper in your mind that tries to convince you to stay where you are, to avoid discomfort, to choose the familiar path even when the familiar path leads nowhere. It is the voice that tells you you can rest now when you have done nothing to earn rest. It is the urge that tries to pull you back to old habits the moment you begin to rise above them. Every person who has ever transformed their life reached a point where they made a powerful decision. They stopped giving weakness permission to make decisions on their behalf. Weakness is persuasive, but only when you allow it to speak uninterrupted. It shows up in subtle forms. hesitation, excuses, doubt, procrastination, it disguises itself as logic, offering you reasons to delay your growth, reasons to take the easy route, reasons to avoid the work. But the truth is that weakness has only the power you grant it. The moment you withdraw that power, the moment you stop entertaining the thoughts that weaken you, your entire inner world begins to shift. Strength is not built by chance, it is built by choice. Every time you choose discipline over comfort, courage over fear, action over avoidance, you are strengthening the very part of you that weakness cannot control. Most people lose the battle not because they lack potential, but because they negotiate with their limitations. They allow their mind to constantly go back and forth between what they desire and what is easy. But greatness requires a firm decision, a decision so strong that your mind no longer debates with the impulses that once held you down. When you decide, truly decide, weakness begins to lose its authority. Your mind becomes a place where only powerful thoughts are allowed to stay. You no longer ask, "Can I do this?" You tell yourself, "This is who I am now." And that shift from questioning to declaring is the beginning of an unstoppable mindset. Your environment can trigger weakness, but your inner standards are what eliminate it. When you raise your standards, everything changes. You start expecting more from yourself. You stop tolerating emotional laziness. You stop allowing negative thoughts to linger. You stop accepting behavior that contradicts your higher vision. Weakness cannot coexist with high standards. The moment you demand more from yourself, weakness begins to evaporate. It is impossible for someone with high internal standards to live a low-quality life. The inner identity always determines the outer results. When you stop negotiating with weakness, your focus sharpens, your clarity strengthens, your actions become consistent. You stop relying on motivation and begin depending on intention. You stop waiting for the mood to be right and start moving regardless of how you feel. And this is where your life begins to transform, because consistency is the road to mastery and mastery is the road to elevation. A mind that no longer negotiates with weakness is a mind that cannot be stopped. It becomes a force that moves forward with certainty, a force that rises above old patterns, a force that carries you to a level where your former limitations no longer exist. To rise higher, you must detach from the noise of ordinary thinking. The world around you is full of voices, doubts, opinions, fears, assumptions, expectations, all competing to shape the direction of your mind. And if you allow those voices to enter unfiltered, they will anchor you to the same level where the majority of people live, think, and struggle. Ordinary thinking is the gravity that keeps most individuals stuck on the ground while only a few ever ascend. The moment you separate yourself from that noise, you begin to discover your true altitude, the height you were meant to live at all along. Ordinary thinking is easy because it requires no discipline. It requires no vision. It asks nothing of you except that you follow the well-worn path of the crowd. It encourages you to stay within the boundaries of what is familiar and socially acceptable. But ordinary thinking has one fatal flaw: it cannot produce extraordinary results. You cannot rise above your current level if you are surrounded by the mental patterns that created that level. If you want to ascend, you must stop thinking the way average people think. You must stop absorbing every opinion as truth. You must stop allowing the world's noise to drown out your inner voice. Detachment does not mean isolation. It means elevation. It means creating enough mental distance to see things clearly. When you detach from ordinary thinking, you gain the power to observe your thoughts instead of being controlled by them. You begin to notice how much of your internal dialogue was never originally yours. You start recognizing that certain beliefs were inherited, absorbed, or taught, not chosen. And the moment you realize that your thinking can be reprogrammed, you unlock the ability to redesign your life from the inside out. The greatest breakthroughs always begin in silence. When you step away from the noise, even briefly, your mind begins to reveal truths you could not hear before. Clarity rises to the surface. Ideas form effortlessly. Priorities become obvious. The chaos around you no longer dictates your emotional state. And in that mental calm, your higher self, your true self, emerges with a strength you did not know you possessed. People often cling to ordinary thinking because it feels safe, but safety is the illusion that keeps them small. The world rewards those who think independently. who dare to challenge what everyone else accepts, who choose vision over conformity. Every major leap in your life will come after a moment where you separate yourself from the noise and listen to your own inner direction. And when you do, you become immune to the limitations that once controlled you. Doubt loses its influence. Fear loses its loudness. You develop a mental altitude that most people never experience, not because they are incapable, but because they never detached from the noise long enough to rise above it. To elevate your life, you must elevate your mind. And to elevate your mind, you must step away from the mental traffic that crowds your clarity. When the noise fades, your true power finally has room to speak, to guide you and to lift you to heights where ordinary thinking can no longer reach. Transformation happens the instant you decide your old limits are too small for your future. There comes a moment in every person's life where they feel the subtle tension between who they are and who they know they are capable of becoming. It is a quiet pressure, a pull toward a higher version of themselves that refuses to be ignored. This moment is the invitation to transform, and it begins with a single decision, the decision that you will no longer accept the boundaries you once lived within. Your old limits were built from old beliefs, old experiences, old fears, and old interpretations of yourself. But the future you desire requires a new framework, one that expands, not confines. Most people never experience transformation because they wait for external proof before they change internally. They wait for better opportunities, clearer paths, more confidence, or more certainty before they begin. But nothing changes until the decision is made. Transformation is an internal event long before it becomes an external result. It begins when you declare with conviction that the old version of you is no longer sufficient for the future you are building. The moment you make that declaration, your mind shifts, your energy shifts, your behavior shifts, and slowly your life follows. Old limits only survive because you continue to honor them. You treat them as truths when they are nothing more than outdated boundaries. They may have protected you once, but now they restrict you. They represent the identity you outgrew but never released. Transformation demands that you stop identifying with who you were and start identifying with who you are becoming. You must be willing to let go of the version of yourself that lived in fear, that hesitated, that doubted, that accepted far less than what you were capable of achieving. You cannot carry your old self into your new life. Something must be left behind. Your mind possesses far more power than the limits you have placed on it. Once you decide to dissolve those limits, you begin activating a level of drive that you didn't realize existed. You start taking actions that once felt impossible. You begin speaking differently, thinking differently, moving differently. You stop waiting for approval. You stop apologizing for wanting more. You stop shrinking yourself to fit into places that no longer match your ambition. This internal expansion is what creates external elevation. When you decide that your old limits are too small, you begin to see opportunities where you once saw obstacles. You begin to feel courage where you once felt fear. Your perspective rises, and with it, your entire identity transforms. And what is identity? It is simply the collection of beliefs you consistently choose. If you choose stronger beliefs, you create a stronger identity. If you choose higher beliefs, you create a higher identity. And a higher identity naturally produces a higher life. Your transformation does not begin when the world recognizes your change. It begins when you recognize that you can no longer remain who you were. It begins when you realize your future is calling you forward with greater urgency than your past is pulling you back. It begins the moment you say with absolute certainty that the limits you once accepted are no longer large enough to contain the person you are becoming. In the end, rising above your old problems is not about eliminating every challenge from your path. It is about becoming the kind of person who is too powerful, too focused, and too elevated to be held down by them. You rise when you expand your thinking. You rise when you strengthen your mind. You rise when you stop negotiating with weakness and start aligning with the highest version of yourself. Every problem you have ever faced was preparing you for the moment you finally choose to lift yourself beyond the level where those problems were created. And once you rise above them, you will look back not with anger or regret, but with a sense of triumph, because you will see that those very struggles shaped you into someone far stronger than you ever imagined. You are not meant to live at the level of your doubts. You are not meant to remain grounded by the weight of ordinary thinking. You were designed to climb, to ascend, to evolve into a version of yourself that stands so high that the challenges that once overwhelmed you now look small in comparison. The power to rise has always been within you. It has been waiting for the moment you decide you will no longer live confined by who you used to be. The moment you choose expansion over limitation, vision over fear, strength over weakness, your entire world begins to shift in your favor. So rise. Rise with intention. Rise with courage. Rise with the certainty that your future is greater than anything you have left behind. Rise until your old problems become stories you tell, not battles you fight. Rise until your mindset becomes a fortress that no challenge can penetrate. Rise until the person you used to be can no longer recognize the person you have become. And when you finally reach that height, when you stand on the mountaintop of your own growth, you will understand the truth that changes everything. The problems were never the enemy. The small version of you was. Rise now, rise boldly, rise without hesitation, and step into the life that has been waiting for you all along.